Hi, everybody. Welcome or welcome back to my garden. My name's Vanessa. I turn our yard into our own little happy place at home, and I want to give you whatever tools I have to help you do the same. Today, I'd like to share with you the mistake that was easiest for me to make when I first started my little cottage garden. Imagine this. I'm a few years into gardening and I'm loving it. The little garden looks good and is a refuge for our family. I'd never had gardens before or even knew anyone who had. And so I was living a bit of a dream. I loved it. In the beginning, I'd spend most of winter doing our indoor spring cleaning so that I could have every excuse to be outside from spring to autumn. We live in Zone 7B, which has relatively mild winters, but I never loved winter. And so as soon as winter came, we turned our attention indoors. I used to say that I don't love winter, but I love what's at least possible indoors in winter. And that's being cozy and warm by a fire. Because this was my mindset, I focused most of my energy into making the garden most beautiful during the growing season, from May to September. This is the main reason I slowly turned my entire backyard into gardens to begin with. I wanted to be outside more in that time frame. But creating that many gardens meant maintenance year-round. If you know anything about gardening, you know that if your whole yard is a cottage garden, early spring prep to get the garden looking nice for the upcoming season is a beast. The truth is, I was having trouble managing it all in early spring. Pruning roses alone meant hours or days of work over weeks. I was also spending quite a bit of time starting seeds for my vegetable garden and cut flower garden. And so it did not take me long before my rose pruning got pushed back to as early as I could possibly get away with it. Early February and sometimes even late January, I was outside in the cold pruning roses. Even though it was cold to me, you have to remember that our winters are mild. We often have weeks on end with temperatures around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is approximately 10 degrees Celsius for high, and still the low would be above freezing. And so those temperatures are perfect for pruning roses. And bundled up in a wool sweater, that temperature window is actually comfortable, even for the likes of me. Perhaps I didn't hate winter after all. In fact, this was a pretty sweet time to be outside. No humidity and no mosquitoes, I'll take that. And so our spring to fall garden season expanded to a whole year out of necessity. Soon, because I needed to be outside to work on the garden anyway, I was bundling my kids up to each day spend as much time outside as the weather permitted. We found we all loved it. Necessity had given birth to desire. Late fall no longer meant saying goodbye to the garden. It meant year-round living as much as possible. When it was about the time in autumn when in the past would have made the transition to indoor living, we set out to pretend as if the season's change had no impact on us and continued with our lives outdoors as usual. I'll tell you what, it did not take me long after the first freeze of autumn had killed the deciduous plants for me to want to turn my entire garden into a formal garden. Eating supper on the patio the day after the first freeze was so pitiful. At once, the entire garden just shriveled away, and by winter, the land had become entirely barren. My boy, who loves flowers, would go searching for any sign of life, only to return disappointed. Once the leaf piles were cleaned up, his season's fun was essentially gone. That's not true. He found other things to do. But that first winter spent outdoors redefined how I saw my cottage garden with respect to winter. In winter, the garden was essentially gone, waiting for spring to reemerge, and this was not okay with me. But I realized it was even far worse than that. Because I had been a three-season gardener all these years, I had plenty of late spring to early summer flowers, but by the time August came around, the flower power had died down significantly. And so the problem wasn't just with winter, it was worse in winter for sure, but an honest analysis of my garden revealed that all of late fall through early spring was not nearly as strong as summer. In early summer, In early spring, I had daffodils, a few here and there, and I had like one clump of peony sitting in the shade that never bloomed. I only had about 3 months of strong color in the garden from May to July. That's about the time when my garden shone. Because I didn't originally want a formal garden, I made the mistake of completely ignoring the winter season in my cottage garden while also neglecting the early spring and very late summer. Formal gardens thrive in the winter because they rely so heavily on evergreens. What I should have done was taken the principles of the formal garden and applied them to my cottage garden. While I didn't want evergreen hedges everywhere, intentionally and heavily dotting evergreen plants multiple places throughout the cottage garden is important. Other things that can add winter interest are grasses, hardscapes like beautiful pathways, and even fountains. A note about fountains though, fountains have to be wintered in very specific ways that cover them to prevent them from cracking. Otherwise, the freeze could crack them. But if you live in a zone 7 like I do, you might can get away with leaving yours uncovered. I know we leave ours uncovered sometimes and it's fine, but our winters are mild. Anyway, back to the plants. To find a good selection of winter plants for your garden, I recommend that you go to your local garden center in the fall at their first opening or at their first opening in the spring. These are the times when they will have the most winter plants for your area. Browse them to see what you can find. But here are a few options for you to research on your own. You can research boxwoods and yews and Japanese hollies. Camellias have lovely little flowers in the fall and in winter. There are red twig dogwoods and yellow twig dogwoods. And don't forget bulbs like crocuses and perennials like hellebores. As for how much winter plants to add, personally, I'm shooting for 40 to 50% of my garden being evergreens. And as for spring plants, plant all the bulbs, you guys. Daffodils, tulips, alliums, hyacinths. Plant irises and peonies and creeping phloxes and woodland phloxes. In autumn, have some Japanese anemones that will give you blooms for weeks. Or what about asters? They're so lovely in the fall. Go to the garden center in late summer to early autumn to see what they have for autumn plants. Having year-round garden interest is to me the height of gardening success. And so while my garden is not fully there yet, things have improved. Last winter alone, I added something like 96 plants, evergreens to the garden. It's not fully there yet. It needs time to mature, but it's on its way. Hi. While we're on the topic of planting for the seasons, I want to recommend this next video to you where I share 16 plants, 4 for each season that I would plant specifically in a sunny garden bed if I was starting over. I hope it's helpful to you. I'll see you there.